It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife.
Oh, wow. Starting right out of the gate with the classics.
I mean, I had to. If you are a fan of classic literature, your brain probably just instantly transported you to 19th century Hertfordshire. You're bracing yourself for, empire waist gowns, carriage rides, and the rigid social hierarchies of Jane Austen's England.
Right, the whole tea and drawing rooms aesthetic.
Exactly. But I'm going to pull the rug out from under you right now, because we aren't in 1812. We are in modern-day Belvedere, Chianti.
A picturesque, sun-drenched Tuscan village with a population of exactly 3,200 people.
Yeah. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a requested source text that takes that iconic opening line we just talked about and drags it, kicking and screaming, into the 21st century.
It's such a fun text.
It really is. We are examining excerpts from the romantic comedy novel No Place to Be Single by Felicia Kingsley, translated by Hilary Locke. And our mission for this deep dive is to pull apart the literary mechanics of this adaptation.
Because it's not just a copy-paste job.
Not at all. We want to see exactly how an author takes a 200-year-old blueprint, like Pride and Prejudice, and successfully modernizes the social pressures, the romance, and those unforgettable character archetypes, all while shifting the setting to a modern Italian village.
Which is a pretty massive undertaking when you think about it.
Right. So let's unpack this. How do you even begin to translate the life-or-death socioeconomic realities of Austen's marriage market into a world where, well, women have their own bank accounts and voting rights?
It's a fascinating structural challenge, isn't it? To make the stakes feel as high for a modern woman as they did for Elizabeth Bennet, you have to find a modern equivalent to the entailed estate.
Because the original threat was literal destitution.
Exactly. Kingsley does this by swapping legal destitution for intense, claustrophobic psychological and social pressure. She sets the story in Belvedere, which operates as this hyper-insular, gossip-fueled ecosystem.
It's the quintessential small town.
Oh, absolutely. It's the kind of town where the primary local sport isn't soccer, it's matchmaking. Kingsley deliberately uses these hyper-specific, almost exaggerated Italian small-town tropes to brilliantly mirror the claustrophobic society of Austen's original gentry.
Where everyone is in everyone else's business.
Precisely. The older generation, the mothers, the grandmothers, the aunts, they essentially act as the village's surveillance network.
That surveillance network is crucial to understanding the environment our protagonist is trapped in. I mean, in Austen, Mrs. Bennet is a solitary force of nature trying to marry off 5 daughters.
Right.
But in Kingsley's Belvedere, it feels like the entire village operates as a collective. Mrs. Bennet.
That is a perfect way to put it. The pressure doesn't just come from inside the house. It comes from the bakery, the pharmacy, the town square. And to give you a sense of how aggressive this environment is, the source text introduces the legend of Don Marzio.
Oh, the priest.
Yes. Belvedere was experiencing such a severe drought of eligible bachelors that when a new parish priest arrived, Don Marzio, a man fresh out of the seminary who had taken literal vows of celibacy, he only lasted 4 months.
Wait, they actually compromised a priest. Like, how does that even happen?
It is a true testament to the village's ruthless matrimonial determination. A local woman named Katerina had a niece, Greta.
Okay.
Greta recognized an opportunity, initiated a highly targeted brief courtship, and supposedly sealed the deal with a plate of homemade wild boar pappardelle.
You're kidding.
No, he left the priesthood and married her. The underlying joke, of course, is that no man is safe in this town. But beneath the comedy, it establishes a very real social reality. In Belvedere, marriage isn't just a relationship.
It's the ultimate social currency.
Exactly. It is the only acceptable narrative for a woman's life in this traditional microcosm.
Which brings us to an interesting divergence from the original text. In Pride and Prejudice, the pressure is survival. Here, as you said, is social currency. But it's also about escape, right?
Definitely.
Because we see this intense desire to flee the village perfectly embodied by the protagonist's older sister, Giada. If she is our modern Jane Bennet, she isn't just waiting patiently for a wealthy man to ride into town. She is actively trying to orchestrate an extraction.
Yes, Giada is the village beautician, but her ambitions are incredibly cosmopolitan. She dreams of London, of high society. And because the local dating pool consists of, like, the funeral director's son and the plumber's son, she turns to modern technology.
Enter the dating apps.
Right. She uses a dating app called Match Me as her potential golden ticket out of Tuscany.
The juxtaposition there is brilliant. You have this ancient, rolling Italian countryside, and inside, A young woman desperately swiping on a smartphone to find a wealthy savior. I know there's a specific scene in the excerpts that highlights just how absurd this digital desperation gets.
It is a phenomenally constructed comedic beat that really emphasizes the generational clash. The women of the house are gathered in the kitchen, physically hunting for a Wi-Fi signal when Giada gets a match.
Simone from Via Reggio.
Simone from Via Reggio. He immediately sends her a photo, but because this is modern digital dating, it's not a headshot, it's an explicit photo.
Oh, no.
So,
And how does the traditional Italian matriarchy react to an unsolicited, explicit photo?
with profound clinical confusion. The eccentric housekeeper, Donatella, squints at the screen and genuinely asks if it's an obelisk.
An obelisk.
Yes. And Elisa, the protagonist, dryly wonders if they had to use anesthesia to surgically implant it.
That's amazing.
And then their mother simply delivers the deadpan verdict. She says, "That's not a man, that's a horse."
Okay, that is laugh out loud funny.
It really is, but it serves a vital narrative purpose. It shows that Giada is willing to subject herself to the indignities of the digital meat market because the alternative, staying in Belvedere and settling for local mediocrity, is entirely unacceptable to her.
So while Giada is looking outward, casting her net onto the internet, the rest of the town is abruptly forced to look inward. We need our Mr. Bingley figure to arrive to set the plot in motion. How does Kingsley handle the classic Netherfield Park is let at last announcement?
She filters it through the ultimate modern small-town vector, the local pharmacist.
Of course.
Duccio, the pharmacist, is the keeper of all village secrets because people confess their ailments and their gossip to him while buying callus, balm, and aspirin. Duccio drops the bombshell that La Giuggiol, the massive local estate, has a new heir.
And who is the heir?
The previous owner, Count Umberto Ricasoli, has passed away, and the estate is going to his great-nephew from London, Charles Bingley.
And the village radar instantly locks on.
Instantly. The moment the local matriarchs confirm that a wealthy single man from London is arriving, they shift from passive surveillance to active tactical planning. The source text details mothers literally weaponizing their domestic skills.
Baking is warfare.
Exactly. One mother plans to corner him with her daughter Paola's cantuccini, which are traditional Tuscan almond biscuits, though the text notes Paola's are as hard as reinforced concrete.
A tactical error, surely.
You'd think so. Another plans an ambush using profiteroles. They are applying centuries-old tactics to capture a 21st century millionaire.
It's such a relatable dynamic, even if you didn't grow up in a Tuscan village.
Yeah.
I want you, the listener, to think about your own hometown dynamics for a second. Have you ever felt the pressure of community expectations weighing down on your personal choices? That feeling where everyone in town thinks they have a say in your life trajectory?
It's a universal feeling.
It is. And that is the exact pressure cooker our protagonist, Elisa Benetti, is living inside. But looking at the excerpts, Elisa doesn't seem like your typical Elizabeth Bennet. She isn't just sitting in a drawing room trading witty barbs. She's physically laboring.
That's a crucial update. Elisa Benetti is 30 years old, and she is the estate manager for the La Giuggiol vineyards. She's covered in dirt, she smells like fermenting grapes, and she is fiercely, fiercely independent.
A working woman.
Very much so. But the most radical shift Kingsley makes to the Elizabeth Bennet archetype is that Elisa is a single mother. She has a highly intelligent, perceptive 13-year-old daughter named Linda.
That completely rewrites the psychology of the character. Elizabeth Bennet's defining trait is her prejudice, her quickness to judge. But Elisa's defining trait seems to be a deep-seated defensive armor. How did she end up managing a vineyard as a single mother in a town that thrives on judgment?
The backstory provided in the text is quite dark and grounds her character in a very modern reality. Elisa had Linda when she was only 17. In a place like Belvedere, the societal backlash was swift and brutal.
I can only imagine the gossip.
It was suffocating. She faced intense judgment whispers in the piazza, outright stares, and the deeply hypocritical, relieved smiles from local mothers who were thrilled that the village's most beautiful girl was suddenly eliminated from the marriage market.
So instead of fleeing the village like her sister Giada wants to do, Elisa just dug her heels in.
Exactly. Her trauma manifested as an unyielding work ethic. She poured every ounce of her survival instinct into viticulture and into protecting her daughter. She effectively married the land.
That makes so much sense.
The dirt, the vines, the unpredictable cycles of agriculture that became her world, she completely walled off her romantic heart as an act of absolute self-preservation. She isn't just looking for a partner to match her wits. She has actively decided that romantic love is a liability she cannot afford.
Which brings us to the man who is going to test that theory. If translating Elizabeth Bennet into a dirt-covered, fiercely protective single mother is a radical shift, who fills the incredibly large, polished shoes of Mr. Darcy.
It's a tricky balance.
Very tricky, because translating an aloof 19th century aristocrat to the 21st century can easily backfire.
Yeah.
How do you make a modern man believably that emotionally stunted without making him a complete sociopath?
Kingsley's approach is brilliant because she grounds his emotional detachment in hypercapitalism. We are introduced to Michael Darcy. He is a wealthy, relentlessly logical investment portfolio manager at a firm called Saxon and Darcy in London.
So he's a finance guy.
The ultimate finance guy. He's the kind of guy who routinely works on Saturdays, despises the inefficiency of the countryside, and operates by a very specific personal manifesto. Eyes for everyone, heart for no one.
Art for no one. That is quite the mission statement. How does a man with that philosophy navigate modern dating? Because the original Darcy just glowered at the corners of ballrooms.
Michael Darcy navigates dating with terrifying efficiency. He casually dates two different women simultaneously, a masseuse named Sheila and a commercial airline pilot named Danielle.
Two at once.
Yeah.
That sounds incredibly messy for a hyperlogical man.
That's the paradox. He dates them specifically because it isn't messy.
How does that work?
He chose a pilot and a masseuse because their grueling, unpredictable work schedules practically guarantee they will never have the time or energy to demand actual emotional intimacy from him.
Wow.
He has structured his romantic life as a series of low-stakes appointments. He uses capitalism, his packed schedule, and his wealth as an impenetrable shield against vulnerability.
It's a fascinating juxtaposition. Elisa uses physical labor and the social stigma of her past as her armor, while Michael uses corporate sterility and financial superiority as his. It sounds like they're both living highly defensive lives.
They absolutely are. Michael lives in what Elisa later very astutely identifies as boxes.
Boxes.
Yes. He moves from his sterile, minimalist apartment box to his sleek corporate office box to his high-end gym box. He rigorously curates his environment to eliminate messiness, unpredictability, and ultimately genuine human connection.
And Elisa's the total opposite.
Right. Elisa's life, by contrast, is entirely grounded in the messy reality of the earth, the weather, and the emotional volatility of raising a teenager.
But wait. The source text reveals that these two aren't meeting for the first time. They have a shared history, which is a massive departure from Austen's text, where Darcy and Elizabeth meet as complete strangers at the Meryton Assembly. How does having a shared childhood history change the classic Darcy-Elizabeth dynamic?
It adds an incredibly poignant layer of lost innocence. The excerpts explain that Charles Bingley's family used to summer at the Tuscan estate, and they would bring Michael and his older brother along.
So they grew up together, essentially.
Summered together, yes. As children, Michael and Elisa were inseparable. They ran wild together. They stole watermelons from the fields. They played in the mud. They built little roadside kiosks out of cardboard to sell mud pies.
Like Chip and Dale, the text said.
Exactly. They existed in this pure, egalitarian space before adulthood, class divides, and trauma fractured their worlds.
So it's not just a culture clash. It's a tragedy of socioeconomic division. They knew each other before the world told them who they were supposed to be, but they haven't seen each other in 15 years. By making the female protagonist a single mother who already has a history with a male lead, the author drastically shifts the power dynamics of the story.
It really raises the stakes.
It does. Elisa isn't just protecting her pride. She is protecting a life she painstakingly rebuilt after the destruction of her youth.
Precisely. And that historical connection makes the inciting incident, the moment their carefully constructed adult worlds finally collide, all the more explosive. The catalyst is, of course, the inheritance.
Raoul's inheriting the estate.
Right. Charles Bingley inherits Le Gigole, but true to his literary predecessor, Charles is deeply averse to making firm decisions. He is terrified of commitment, even when it comes to prime Tuscan real estate.
So he imports his own personal decision-maker.
Exactly. He drags his best friend, Michael, down from London to evaluate the property. Michael's goal is pure efficiency. Assess the land, secure a quick sale to a shady Russian billionaire client named Bogdanovich who wants to raise the vineyards to build a luxury golf course and get back to London.
A golf course over a vineyard. That's sacrilege.
Total sacrilege. And Charles also brings along his twin sister, Caroline, who immediately begins complaining about the lack of high-end spas and cosmopolitan nightlife in the rustic countryside.
Caroline Bingley complaining about the lack of luxury is a universal constant across all adaptations. I love that. So this London trio, armed with spreadsheets and entitlement, descends upon the estate. But the text mentions they are greeted with absolute hostility right out of the gate by Elisa, her mother, and Donatella. If they are the new owners, why is the welcome so frosty?
Because of a deeply unfortunate timing issue regarding class entitlement. Right before Charles and Michael's car pulls up, a different set of relatives had arrived. The exceedingly arrogant Armoroli Ricasolis from Ponticelli,
More relative.
distant cousins. They had barged onto the property, baselessly claimed they were the true heirs, and had the audacity to refer to Elisa and her family as mere servants.
So the defensive shields are already fully raised and electrified by the time the actual owner arrives.
Exactly. Elisa is vibrating with justified anger regarding her family's dignity. And then Charles and Michael step out of the car. And Michael, the boy she used to steal watermelons with, the boy who knows the smell of the Tuscan mud just as well as she does, looks right at her, and his eyes just slide past her. He doesn't recognize her at all. He assumes she is just part of the estate's hired help.
Oh, that is a devastating psychological blow. It's the ultimate erasure. He is so blinded by his spreadsheets, his corporate detachment, and his London elitism that he literally cannot see the human being standing in front of him, let alone a vital piece of his own childhood. And I imagine he manages to make this lack of perception even worse.
He compounds the error in spectacular classic Darcy fashion at the mid-August village festival. Elisa is stuck working the drink stand.
Working the stand.
Yes. In Belvedere, single mothers and unmarried women nearing their 30s are relegated to manual labor at festivals, while the younger, quote-unquote, eligible women are out dancing and displaying themselves.
That is deeply unfair.
It's the social hierarchy at work.
Yeah.
While pouring drinks, Elisa overhears a conversation between Michael and Charles.
This is the famous, she is tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me moment. How does Kingsley modernize that iconic insult?
Charles is looking at the dance floor, pointing out how stunning Elisa's sister Giada is. He asks Michael what he thinks of Elisa. Michael, dripping with corporate arrogance, dismissively states that Elisa simply has a great personality.
Ouch. A great personality.
It gets worse. He then pivots to brag that he has absolutely no interest in rural women, asserting that with his status and wealth, he can pull any beautiful, sophisticated woman he wants back in London.
It's the modern kiss of death, and
Yep.
it reduces her entirely. And she overhears this while literally serving him drinks. How does she react? Because Elizabeth Bennet just laughs it off with her friends. I get the feeling Elisa's a bit more combative.
Elisa does not laugh it off. She rips off her festival apron, which, in a brilliant touch of character detail, features a slogan reading, "Even a shoe is delicious if it's fried."
I love that apron.
She throws it directly at Michael's chest and storms away. But the true retaliation comes the next day. Michael needs a guide to evaluate the vast estate and the local community for his report. Elisa, wearing a mask of perfect professional compliance, volunteers.
I sense a trap.
A massive one. Elisa realizes that Michael views the entire village as an inefficient joke, so she decides to weaponize that very provincialism against him. She uses her position as his guide to set him up on 3 disastrous, inescapable dates with the local Katazzi cousins to systematically dismantle his London ego.
Okay, we have to break down these dates. How exactly does one weaponize provincial Italian culture against a hyperlogical British investment banker?
It is a masterclass in farcical pacing. The first date is with Regina. Michael assumes he is going for a quiet drink, but Elisa has arranged a full-scale family ambush.
Oh no, a family dinner.
It's a dinner with Regina's entire extended family. Regina's mother violently force-feeds Michael massive, suffocating portions of heavy local dishes while aggressively interrogating him about his financial portfolio, his intentions, and his pedigree.
The carb interrogation.
Exactly. To make matters worse, the mother spends half the dinner actively insulting Giada's reputation just to make Regina look like a better prospect.
It's the ultimate nightmare for a man who curates his life to avoid messiness. He's trapped in a carbohydrate-fueled interrogation. Who is the second cousin?
The second cousin is Intemerata, the ultra-Catholic conservative. She bypasses small talk entirely and informs a horrified Michael that her life plan involves having exactly 8 children. 4 boys and 4 girls, all to be named strictly after saints. Furthermore, she makes it violently clear that she expects absolute purity, meaning 0 premarital intimacy.
And Michael is a man with 2 simultaneous girlfriends.
Right. Michael, whose entire romantic life is built on casual, scheduled physical encounters without emotional attachment, actually loses his cool. He snaps and openly yells that he very much enjoys sex outside of marriage, completely shattering his icy British reserve.
She broke him. And there's a third date.
The grand finale is Pompilia. Elisa directs Michael to a scenic, romantic little lake. Michael arrives, his nerves fried, but he thinks he's finally on a normal date with a modern woman. Pompilia introduces herself as a digital entrepreneur.
Oh, he must love that.
Michael, the venture capitalist, is instantly relieved. He speaks her language. He asks about her e-commerce platform and what products she moves.
Let me guess, it's not artisanal olive oil.
Not quite. Pompilia cheerfully explains that she runs a highly lucrative business selling her unwashed, used underwear to strangers on the internet.
Was.
Yes. And while Michael's brain is short-circuiting trying to process this, Pompilia suggests they skip the tedious romance, head straight to the bushes, and get right to the physical stuff.
That is amazing.
It leaves Michael utterly traumatized and sprinting for the safety of the estate.
That is just phenomenal writing. Think about the mechanics of what Kingsley is doing here. She isn't just writing funny scenes. She is systematically deconstructing the male ego. Think about times you've been misunderstood or completely underestimated based on your zip code or your job title. Michael looked at this village and saw a bunch of uneducated peasants he could easily displace for a golf course.
And Elisa proves him completely wrong.
Right. Elisa uses the very culture he despises. The aggressive hospitality, the intense religion, the bizarre, modern, rural side hustles as a weapon to absolutely destroy his cosmopolitan superiority.
It completely shatters his armor. He realizes he has no control in this environment. But while the comedy of these dates provides a fantastic narrative buffer, it is merely setting the stage for the intense, dark, emotional revelations that are about to hit.
We're shifting gears.
We are. If we look at the structural requirements of a Pride and Prejudice adaptation, we've covered the initial prejudice, the disastrous first impressions, and the culture clash. But we are missing a massive piece of the puzzle. We need a Wickham.
Yes, the classic scoundrel. George Wickham is the engine that drives the deepest conflicts in Austen's text, the man who wronged Darcy in the past and threatens Elizabeth's family in the present. How does Kingsley manifest that threat in a modern setting?
She does it by pulling off an incredibly daring structural twist. To understand it, we have to look closely at Michael's interactions with Linda, Elisa's 13-year-old daughter.
Okay, let's look at Linda.
While Michael is being tortured by the Cousy cousins, he is also spending time at the estate where he keeps running into Linda.
And what is their dynamic? Because Michael hates messiness, and teenagers are the definition of mess.
Surprisingly, they connect. Linda is a phenomenal character. She is fiercely intelligent, she reads Stephen King's Carrie for fun, she voluntarily translates Latin texts during her summer vacation, and she possesses a terrifyingly sharp, unvarnished intuition about adult hypocrisy.
She sounds awesome.
She is. And Michael, despite his coldness, respects her intellect. He actually finds himself sitting on a wall with her, giving her surprisingly earnest advice about dating, self-respect, and navigating first crushes. He genuinely likes this kid, completely unaware of her true parentage.
Which sets up a ticking time bomb. How did the detonation happen?
It happens in the village pharmacy. Michael is down in Belvedere, and he casually overhears the local gossip mill. He finds out that Linda isn't Elisa's younger sister or a cousin. She is Elisa's daughter.
And he does the math.
Michael is a numbers guy. He instantly does the math. Linda is 13. Elisa is 30. She had this child when she was 17. The timeline snaps into focus in his mind, aligning perfectly with those lost childhood summers. He realizes that the last time he saw Elisa 15 years ago was just before she got pregnant.
Oh, the realization must be sickening. He connects the dates. What does he do?
He confronts Elisa with a brutal, demanding intensity. He corners her and demands to know who the father is, and Elisa, stripped of her sarcastic armor, finally drops the bomb. The truth comes out. Linda's father is George Darcy, Michael's deceased older brother.
Wait, Kingsley made the Darcy brother the Wickham figure.
Yes, it is a stunning, brilliant narrative choice.
That is wild.
Right. In the original text, Wickham is an outsider, the son of a steward who tries to elope with Darcy's younger sister and later runs off with Elizabeth's younger sister. He is a peripheral, lingering threat. But Kingsley takes all that toxic Wickham energy, injects it directly into Darcy's own bloodline, and makes George Darcy's past sins the literal foundational trauma of the heroine's current life.
That drastically shifts the power dynamics. It makes the conflict so much more intimate and inescapable. What exactly did George do?
The text reveals that George Darcy was a manipulative, narcissistic addict who squandered his trust fund and manipulated everyone around him. When they were teenagers, he pursued Elisa.
When she got pregnant.
When a terrified 17-year-old Elisa finally tracked him down on the phone to excitedly tell him she was pregnant, naively thinking he would act like Prince Charming and save her, George's response was monstrous. He coldly offered to wire her money for a discreet abortion.
Oh my God.
When she refused, he told her she was entirely on her own, aggressively threatened her to keep her mouth shut to protect his reputation, changed his phone number, and vanished from her life forever.
That is incredibly dark, and it perfectly explains Elisa's fierce, impenetrable independence. She learned at 17 that relying on wealthy, powerful men leads to absolute ruin. Her entire life, her connection to the land, her protective nature over Linda, her refusal to date, is built on the crater George Darcy left behind. How does Michael react to the revelation that his brother is the monster in her closet?
His reaction is incredibly flawed, deeply ingrained in his capitalistic worldview, and yet profoundly human. He is instantly enraged. But he isn't just angry at his dead brother, he's furious at Elisa.
At Elisa, why?
He feels he was robbed of a niece for 13 years, and his immediate knee-jerk instinct is to try and retroactively apply his wealth to fix a past he wasn't part of. He yells at her, essentially saying, I could have fixed this, I have money, I could have sent her to the best private schools in London, introduced her to the right circles, secured her future.
He throws his checkbook at a 13-year-old woman.
Yeah.
How does Elisa respond to that?
With absolute fiery defiance. She shuts him down completely. She fiercely defends her choice to remain silent. She tells him, point blank, that she refused to be controlled by the purse strings of a family that viewed her as garbage to be disposed of.
Good for her.
She protected her dignity and her right to be a mother on her own terms, even if it meant raising her child in the dirt of a vineyard instead of a London townhouse.
That exchange highlights the fundamental philosophical divide between them. Michael genuinely believes that money, access, and capital can solve any human problem. It's the core of his box's philosophy. But Elisa knows that autonomy, dignity, and self-determination are worth infinitely more than any bank account. So Michael is suddenly left standing there having to grapple with the fact that his golden boy brother, the brother he has spent his entire adult life trying to outachieve in the corporate world, was an absolute coward who abandoned his own blood.
Exactly. And worse, it forces Michael to look in the mirror. He realizes that his own behavior, his emotional detachment, his refusal to commit, his dual girlfriends, mirrors his brother's selfishness a little too closely. He may not be an addict, but he is just as emotionally bankrupt as George was.
So we have this massive, heavy, tragic revelation hanging in the air. The animosity should be at an all-time high. How does the narrative physically move them from this point of extreme conflict toward a romantic resolution? Because in a traditional romance, this is the part where they stay away from each other for 50 pages.
Kingsley doesn't let them stay away from each other. She forces them into extreme, continuous physical proximity, which turns that shared anger into red-hot romantic tension.
How so?
The harvest begins. They are side by side picking grapes in the sweltering Tuscan heat, hands brushing against each other among the vines. Later, during another village festival, they are forced to hide together inside a tiny, claustrophobic wooden play hut on a children's playground just to avoid Linda seeing them arguing. The physical boundaries are constantly collapsing.
Proximity is the ultimate catalyst. I know there's a specific culinary scene that serves as the breaking point for all this built-up tension.
Yes, the famous pisci pasta scene. For context, pisci is a traditional Tuscan pasta-thick, hand-rolled strands that require a lot of physical labor, kneading, and rolling to get right.
Sounds exhausting.
It is. Elisa and Michael are alone in the estate kitchen, supposed to be making dough from scratch. The physical act of kneading the dough, the flour everywhere, the shared rhythm, it breaks down their final defenses. The sarcastic banter shifts, the air gets heavy, and it erupts into this flour-covered, deeply passionate, intense makeout session right there over the cutting board.
Finally, the emotional dam breaks.
It breaks, but it's immediately interrupted. They are literally seconds away from crossing the point of no return when the front door slams open and the house suddenly fills with people returning from the village.
The classic slow burn interruption. But I imagine that changes the dynamic. They've acknowledged the physical reality of their connection. Where does it go from the kitchen counter?
It leads directly into the climax of the comedic farce. Later that night, the tension is unbearable. Elisa slips a discreet note to Michael, basically saying, "Let's finish what we started. Meet me in your room early tomorrow morning before the rest of the house wakes up."
Oh, a clandestine morning rendezvous. What could possibly go wrong?
Absolutely everything. The next morning, Michael is in his bedroom, heart pounding, waiting for the door to open and for Elisa to walk in. Instead, there's a calm knock, the door opens, and it's Donatella, the intensely eccentric housekeeper.
Let's pause for a second because we need to talk about Donatella. She is such a phenomenal background character. She's not just a maid, she is a surreal presence in this house.
She is incredible. Donatella claims to have lived 1,000 lives. She casually mentions she used to be a mezzo-soprano at the Paris Opera and that she was a former muse for the legendary provocative fashion photographer Helmut Newton.
Just casually dropping Helmut Newton.
Exactly. She is entirely unflappable and possesses an almost terrifying aura of calm. So Donatella walks into Michael's bedroom and calmly announces that he has visitors downstairs in the drawing room.
At dawn. Who is visiting at dawn?
Donatella informs him that his girlfriend has arrived from London. Oh, and his other girlfriend has also arrived.
No.
Yes. Sheila, the masseuse, and Danielle, the pilot. Through a series of disastrous logistical coincidences, both of his meticulously scheduled, low-maintenance London girlfriends discovered his double life, tracked his location to Tuscany, and happened to show up at the villa at the exact same time.
That is the ultimate collision of his boxes. He tried to keep his life perfectly compartmentalized, and now the compartments have violently crashed into each other in an Italian living room. How does this confrontation play out?
It is brilliantly constructed chaos, grounded by Donatella's absolute lack of panic. The scene opens in the living room. Danielle and Sheila are vibrating with rage. Donatella walks in, surveys the hostile environment, calmly picks up a priceless antique Ming vase from the coffee table, states that she'll just be moving that out of the blast radius, and politely asks if either of the furious women would care for an espresso.
I love her so much.
Danielle just grits her teeth and asks for cyanide.
Donatella is the true hero of this novel, so Michael walks downstairs into this firing squad.
It is a massacre. Danielle, the pilot, is screaming at Michael to go F-word himself. Sheila, the masseuse, actually loses her mind, picks up a heavy bohemian crystal bear off a side table, and hurls it directly at his head.
A crystal bear.
Right at his head. And right at the absolute peak of this screaming, glass-shattering confrontation, Elisa walks into the room.
She was coming for the romantic rendezvous, and she walks into a Jerry Springer episode.
Yeah.
How does she react? Because the old Elisa would have yelled, and Elizabeth Bennet would have made a cutting remark.
Her reaction is devastating because she doesn't do either. She doesn't scream, she doesn't cry, the fire completely leaves her eyes. She looks at Michael, looks at the two screaming women, and her defensive armor just slides permanently back into place.
Oh, that hurt.
She coolly, quietly dismisses him. She tells him she is actually incredibly grateful. She's glad she got to see exactly who he really is and exactly how he treats women before she made the mistake of becoming just another notch on his bedpost.
Ouch. She equates him entirely with George.
Exactly. She turns her back on him and walks away, refusing to let him explain, leaving him standing there in the literal and metaphorical wreckage of his own terrible choices.
It forces a massive psychological reckoning for Michael. Up until this exact moment, he thought he was the hero of his own story. He thought he was the logical, successful, superior brother. But looking at the tears and the rage of the women he treated as conveniences and seeing the absolute disgust in the eyes of the woman he loves, he realizes his efficiency is just cruelty. He sees that his emotional detachment made him act exactly like the monster he despised. He has hit rock bottom.
And in true Austen fashion, it takes the male lead hitting absolute rock bottom to realize he needs to fundamentally deconstruct and rebuild his own character to be worthy of the heroine. Darcy has to save the Bennet family from Wickham's ruin to prove his worth. But Kingsley doesn't give Michael an easy rescue mission.
Right, because Michael packs his bags in shame and flees back to London. He retreats to his box. But Elisa isn't sitting around waiting for a letter of apology. She has her own war to fight. What is happening with the estate?
The clock is ticking. Charles Bingley still intends to sell Le Giugio to Bogdanovich, the shady Russian billionaire who wants to pave over the vines. Elisa's only hope to save her home, her life's work, and Linda's inheritance is to buy the estate herself.
Can she afford that?
Not at all. She is a single mother managing a farm. She doesn't have millions in liquid capital. The local bank flatly refuses to give her a mortgage unless she can prove she has major international buyers lined up for her next vintage of wine.
So our dirt-covered, fiercely independent farmer has to leave her sanctuary. Where does she go?
She packs her bags and travels to the highly exclusive, incredibly intimidating London Wine Fair. She sets up a modest booth, desperately trying to pitch her Tuscan wine to wealthy international distributors. And who happens to intercept her on the convention floor?
Let me guess. Michael,
Michael?
of course. How does he approach her after the disaster in Tuscany?
He essentially ambushes her stand. He plays the role of a mysterious, wealthy buyer, tasting her wine and asking professional questions, but his eyes are pleading. It is clear he has been desperately pacing his corporate cage, looking for any excuse to bridge the gap between them. He uses his influence and a bit of groveling to convince her to let him take her to dinner that night to discuss a distribution deal.
A business dinner as a Trojan horse for a romantic plea. Where does he take her? I'm assuming somewhere with a lot of Michelin stars.
He doesn't take her to a restaurant, he takes her to his home, his apartment in Grosvenor Square, in the ultra-wealthy heart of Mayfair. And this apartment is crucial to understanding the climax of the novel.
How so?
The text describes it as a physical manifestation of his internal psychological state. It is entirely blindingly white. White mohair sofas, white lacquered surfaces, glass tables. It looks less like a home and more like a high-end operating room. There are no personal photos on the walls, there's no clutter, there is absolutely no evidence of a lived human life.
It is the ultimate box. It's sterile. How does Elisa, a woman who literally makes her living from the dirt, react to this sterile environment?
She is deeply unsettled by it. Michael attempts a grand romantic gesture. He cooks for her. And he doesn't just make a simple meal, he cooks an incredibly extravagant, Pinchiori-style, multi-course dinner right there in his dark brown designer kitchen.
For those who might not know the culinary reference, Enoteca Pinchiori is a legendary 3-Michelin-star restaurant in Florence. It is the absolute pinnacle of high-end Italian gastronomy. So Michael is trying to recreate the peak of her culture inside his sterile London box.
Exactly. He is trying to prove he can provide everything she could ever want. Over this incredible meal, they have a massive, deeply emotional, philosophical clash. Michael finally lays all his cards on the table. He drops the corporate shield entirely. He tells her he loves her, and he offers her the world.
The big proposal.
Yes. He says, "Marry me, move to London, bring Linda." He promises to pay for the most elite private schools, to introduce them to high society, to give her a life where she never has to worry about a bank loan or a bad harvest ever again. He offers her absolute financial and social security.
Let's pause and analyze this, because for 99% of romance novels, this is the fairy tale ending. The billionaire swoops in, saves the struggling single mother from a life of hard labor, and whisks her away to a penthouse. The problem is solved. Roll credits. But what does Elisa do?
She rejects him completely.
Yes. Why? Break down her reasoning, because it is the core of what makes this book special.
Her rejection is what elevates this story from a simple rom-com to a sharp critique of modern values. She looks around this multi-million-pound apartment and tells him she refuses to be a beautiful figurine placed on a glass shelf in his empty life.
Figurine on a shelf. Wow.
She directly attacks his philosophy. She accuses him of living his entire life inside boxes, the office box, the gym box, the apartment box. She pierces his armor by pointing out that he only works this high-stress, soulless job to amass wealth to prove he is fundamentally better than his dead brother, George. He isn't working for passion, he is working out of spite.
She realizes he isn't actually living, he's just surviving efficiently.
Exactly. She delivers the final, crushing blow. She tells him, "I don't want to simply be with you, I want to be happy with you. I know I wouldn't be happy here in this sterile box. But what's infinitely worse is that looking around, I can see that you aren't happy here either."
That is a phenomenal piece of dialogue. Think about what this means for the modernization of the genre. It is a massive feminist triumph. Elisa doesn't just want a rich husband to solve her financial problems. She demands a partner who respects her world, her agency, and the life she built from the ground up with her own hands. She chooses the unpredictable dirt of Tuscany, her struggling vines, and her hard-won independence over his sterile, guaranteed luxury.
We actually see this fiercely protected identity perfectly encapsulated earlier in the London trip. Elisa runs into Caroline Bingley and Caroline's snobby, high-society friends at an ultra-exclusive luxury spa. Caroline's friends instantly try to intimidate Elisa. They realize who she is, and they try to make her feel small, provincial, and out of place, even bragging about their past entanglements with Michael.
Classic mean girl tactics. How does Elisa handle the London elite?
She absolutely eviscerates them with quiet dignity. She doesn't shrink. She stares them down in the middle of this marble spa and proudly declares, "I am a farmer." And you might want to thank people like me, because otherwise you would have to go out and pick those baby carrots and celery stalks you survive on yourself.
Oh, brilliant.
She completely owns her identity. She refuses to be shamed for her labor. She will not compromise who she is for anyone, not the London elite, and not even the billionaire she loves.
So she walks out of his apartment, gets on a plane, and flies back to her uncertain future in Italy, leaving Michael alone in his white box. What happens to him after that door clicks shut?
The rejection shatters the very foundation of his identity, but it's exactly the catalyst he needed. After she leaves, Michael is left standing alone in the deafening silence of Grosvenor Square. And for the first time in his life, he really looks at his environment. He looks at his phone and realizes the background image is just the stock photo that came with the device, because he has no personal memories worth saving.
That's incredibly sad.
It gets sadder. He realizes he is sleeping in his dead brother's old bed. He is working at a firm where his dead brother used to work.
He's literally living a ghost's life.
He realizes he has no life of his own. The money means nothing. He is the poorest man in the world, despite his massive bank accounts, because he possesses absolutely no passion, no family, and no purpose outside of corporate spite.
So the Darcy ego is finally completely dead, what rises from the ashes, because he needs a grand gesture to fix this. In Austin, Darcy tracks down Wickham and pays him off to save the Bennett family. How does a modern investment banker execute a grand gesture?
By committing corporate treason and destroying his own boxes. The next morning, Michael goes into the sleek offices of Saxton and Darcy. He walks into the boardroom, takes the preliminary sales agreement for the Lajijol estate, the contract that would have sold Elisa's home to Bogdanovich, the Russian billionaire, and he physically tears it to pieces.
No way.
He single-handedly saves the estate from becoming a golf course.
He sabotages his own firm's deal?
Yeah.
And then what?
He resigns. On the spot. He completely walks away from his lucrative partnership, from his status, from his entire London existence. He packs a single bag, and a few days later, he shows up in Belvedere completely unannounced. He walks onto the dusty estate carrying the exact same sleek suitcase he left with, but he is a completely different man.
Let me guess, he finds her in the vines.
He finds her,
Yeah.
and instead of offering her the world, he asks to be let into hers. He tells Elisa he has completely rewritten his CV. He tells her he is willing to start at the absolute bottom. He wants to be an intern.
And then
Yes. He wants to learn viticulture, learn the soil, learn how to grow something real. He tells her he has moved to Italy permanently to figure out how to build a messy, beautiful, real life with her.
oh, that is a brilliant subversion of the traditional fairy tale narrative.
Right.
The prince does not rescue the peasant girl by taking her away from her struggles to lock her in his shining tower in the city. The prince realizes that his tower is actually a prison, so he willingly leaves his kingdom behind to come work in the dirt of her fields, because he recognizes that her life, despite the struggles and the gossip and the hard labor, is real and true and full of genuine love. It is the ultimate leveling of the romantic playing field.
It's a beautiful thematic resolution. But Kingsley doesn't just tie up the main couple, she resolves the entire ecosystem of characters. We can't forget about Giada and Charles.
Right. What happened to our Jane and Bingley? Because last we checked, Giada was swiping on apps and Charles was avoiding commitment.
Their conflict is resolved through a massive clearing of communication. It turns out Charles had gone completely silent and retreated to London, not because he didn't care, but because he was following Michael's terrible, emotionally stunted advice to give her space.
Bad advice from the guy with 2 girlfriends.
Exactly. Giada, interpreting this through her own insecurities, assumed he had ghosted her because she was just a provincial country fling to him. Once Michael experiences his own awakening, he clears the air with Charles. Charles immediately drops his fear of commitment, rushes back to Belvedere, and begs Giada for forgiveness, completely committing to her.
I love that. But wait, there is still one major loose thread. Michael tore up the contract with the Russian billionaire, meaning Charles still owns the estate. But Charles doesn't want to run a vineyard. Does Elisa still have to buy it?
Yes, the financial reality remains. Elisa still needs a massive bank loan to purchase Le Gijol from Charles to secure her family's future. And she still needs a powerful guarantor to convince the local bank manager to approve the mortgage.
I swear, if Michael just pays for it, I'm going to be so mad. That ruins the whole feminist arc.
He doesn't, and that is the genius of the ending. Michael stands beside her, but he doesn't write the check. When Elisa is sitting in the bank manager's office, facing rejection, the door opens. Who walks in to save the day?
Is it Donatella?
It's Donatella.
The Helmut Newton muse strikes again.
Donatella strides into the bank, slams her solid gold Tiffany fountain pen down on the manager's desk, and reveals she has vast hidden personal assets. She signs as Elisa's guarantor, risking her own fortune to secure the loan. It is a phenomenal moment because it proves that found family, female solidarity, and community loyalty are just as vital and just as powerful as romantic love and saving the day.
That is the perfect way to resolve the plot without compromising Elisa's agency. Which brings us to the epilogue. The source text gives us a glimpse into the future, right? 7 months later.
Yes, the epilogue is a masterclass in joyous chaos. It is set 7 months later at Le Gijol. The estate is now thriving under Elisa's ownership, and they are hosting a massive, lavish wedding for one of Michael's oldest friends, who happens to be a famous Formula One driver. So this sleepy Tuscan village is suddenly swarming with the international jet set. Paparazzi, supermodels, billionaires, they're all descending on Belvedere.
A far cry from the village that nearly broke a priest over wild boar pasta. How are our couples handling the chaos?
We find our two sisters, Giada and Elisa, locked inside a bathroom away from the wedding reception. They are huddled over a plastic stick, a pregnancy test.
Oh, for who?
Well, the reader is led to believe it's Giada's. Charles and Giada have been openly, desperately trying to start a family, and Giada is a bundle of raw nerves waiting for the result. The 3 minutes pass, the test develops, it's positive.
Yeah.
Giada looks at the 2 lines, takes a deep breath, and looks up at Elisa with total serene calm. And Giada says, well, that means the positive test was not mine.
It's Elisa's.
It's Elisa's. She and Michael are officially together. The text plays coy about whether they have officially signed marriage papers. They are deeply committed and constantly bantering, referring to each other as Mr. and Mrs. Benetti, teasingly using her last name instead of his to show who really holds the power on the farm. And now they are expanding their beautiful, messy, unconventional family.
What an incredible, joyful bow to tie on top of this wild literary journey.
It really is. When you step back and look at the entire narrative arc, it's staggering. We've traveled from the suffocating, gossip-filled aisles of a tiny Tuscan bakery to the terrifying digital frontier of modern dating apps, into the sterile, joyless perfection of a London penthouse, and finally all the way back to the grape-stained, vibrant, messy earth of Chianti.
It covers so much ground.
Felicia Kingsley took the timeless, skeletal blueprint of Austen's social satire and injected it with intensely modern, bleeding-edge concerns. Through Elisa and Michael, we explored the harsh realities of single motherhood, the absolute necessity of female financial independence, and the profound, isolating emptiness of modern hustle culture.
I want to ask you, the listener, to stop and reflect on your own life for a second. Think about the physical and mental spaces you occupy every day. Are you living your life in boxes like Michael was? Are you just blindly checking off societal expectations, moving robotically from the office box to the gym box to the apartment box, mistaking efficiency for actual happiness? Or are you actively cultivating something real, something grounded, and maybe a little bit terrifyingly messy, like Elisa did with her vineyard?
It's a profound question. Kingsley essentially uses the Trojan horse of a breezy romantic comedy to deliver a scathing critique of how we choose to spend our limited time on Earth.
Exactly. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a lingering thought, something to really chew on long after you finish listening to this deep dive. If the classic 19th century romance was all about finding a wealthy partner to secure your survival, about 2 disparate halves forming a socially acceptable whole page, this modern interpretation asks us something completely different. It asks, can you truly deeply fall in love with someone else if you haven't first done the grueling work of building a life that you genuinely love living yourself? Think about that the next time you look around at the boxes you live in. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into No Place to Be Single. We'll catch you next time.